The moment her stepsisters shoved her forward, the fine silk of their gowns brushing against her coarse wool, every elder in the great hall stood as one. Nessa stumbled onto the ceremonial stone, her worn leather boots scuffing the ancient runes, a smudge of dirt and dog hair in a sea of polished perfection. She was a kennel keeper, meant to be invisible, yet now she stood before the Alpha King, a man whose silence could break armies. Her stepsisters, Iona and Kate, had done this to shame her, to make her a laughingstock before the entire Northern Conclave. But what no one knew was that the scent of hound and hay and winter earth that clung to her was the first thing to reach the king in a decade. And for the first time since the old wars, his wolf, a creature of legend and fury, lifted its head and answered. If you believe that the quietest heart can tame the wildest soul, type "seen" below, and let me tell you what happened next. To understand how she got there, you need to know that Nessa's life was measured in the needs of others. It was measured in the ladles of warm mash for the wolfhounds, the soft cloths for polishing tack, and the quiet, humming lullabies she sang to nervous pups during thunderstorms. She lived in the shadow of her stepfather's grand mountain hold, but her world was the sprawling stone kennels at its base. Her hands were capable, calloused from leather reins and splintered wood, but they were gentle. The hounds, massive beasts with jaws that could snap bone, would rest their great heads in her lap, their amber eyes soft with trust. They knew her heart, and it was a language she understood better than the clipped, cruel words of her stepfamily. Iona and Kate were her stepfather's daughters, jewels of the house, with hair like spun gold and laughter like breaking glass. They wore silk and velvet, their scents a cloying cloud of imported floral oils. Nessa wore wool and leather, and smelled of the clean, honest scent of the animals she cared for. They saw her as less than a servant, a stray taken in out of a misplaced sense of duty by their father, after her own mother had passed. They took pleasure in reminding her of her place, which was anywhere but in the light. The Luna trial was the talk of the territories for months. Alpha King Thane of the Blackwood Pack was a man forged in the crucible of the border wars. He had united the fractured northern clans through sheer will and brutal strength. He was a king in all but name, his authority absolute. But he had no mate, no Luna to temper his harsh rule or secure his line. The elders had decreed it was time. And so, the trial was called. It was not a contest of strength, but a formal presentation. The eligible daughters of every high-ranking family were to present themselves in the great hall of his ancestral fortress, Stonefall. Nessa had no part in it. She had watched from the kennel gates as Iona and Kate preened and prepared, their maids fluttering around them with ribbons and pearls. She was content in her world of quiet loyalty and wet noses. The night of the ceremony, a bitter wind howled down from the peaks, rattling the iron-strapped doors of the hold. A fever had taken one of the youngest hounds, a pup named Fen, and Nessa had been with him all day, wiping his brow with cool cloths and murmuring soft words. She had missed her evening meal, and her simple brown dress was smudged with mud and a poultice of herbs. She was just coaxing a little water between the pup's teeth when Iona and Kate swept into the kennels, their faces masks of false sympathy. "Oh, the poor thing," Iona cooed, gesturing to the shivering hound without ever looking at it. Kate's eyes, cold and blue, fixed on Nessa. "Father is furious. You were supposed to be in the kitchens, helping with the final preparations for the feast." Nessa rose slowly, her back aching. "Fen is unwell. He needed me." "He's a dog, you foolish girl," Iona snapped, her patience gone. "There are more important things tonight." You are making our house look disrespectful." She grabbed Nessa's arm, her painted nails digging into her skin. "You will come. You will stand at the back of the hall where you belong, and at least pretend to be part of this family." They dragged her from the warmth of the kennels, up the winding stone stairs to the main keep. The air grew thick with the scent of beeswax, roasting meat, and the expensive perfumes of the guests. The great hall was a river of color and sound. Lords and ladies in their finest attire stood talking in low, respectful tones. At the far end of the hall, on a throne carved from a single massive oak, sat Alpha King Thane. He was exactly as the stories described him, a presence that seemed to drink the light from the room. He was unnaturally still, his broad shoulders draped in a cloak of black wolf fur. His dark hair was tied back from a face that was all hard lines and sharp angles, a face that held no warmth at all. His eyes, a pale, piercing gold, scanned the room with a predator's disinterest. He looked bored and dangerous, a man enduring a tedious duty. The air around him seemed colder, heavier. The presentation had already begun. A herald, his voice booming, called the names of the eligible women one by one. Each would walk the length of the hall, down the center aisle, and present herself before the throne. Iona and Kate shoved Nessa into a dark alcove behind a tapestry. "Stay here, and do not move," Kate hissed, before they smoothed their own gowns and melted back into the crowd, positioning themselves for their turn. Nessa watched, hidden in the shadows. She saw women of breathtaking beauty, draped in jewels that glittered in the torchlight. She saw women with powerful, confident strides, their lineage announced with pride. None of them, not one, earned more than a passing glance from the Alpha King. His gaze remained remote, his expression unchanged. His wolf was sleeping, or perhaps it was dead inside him. Then, the herald's voice faltered for a moment. He seemed to be looking at a smudge on his scroll. He cleared his throat. "From the house of Lord Valerius, the Lady Nessa." A confused silence fell over the hall. Nessa's blood ran cold. It wasn't her name. It couldn't be. Her mother was a commoner, a healer. She had no title. This was a mistake. But it was a mistake Iona and Kate were ready for. They appeared at her side as if from thin air. "Our little joke," Iona whispered, her smile a slash of red in the dim light. "Father wanted to show he had 3 daughters to offer. A gesture of respect." "Go on," Kate urged, her hand firm in the center of Nessa's back. "Don't embarrass us further." Before Nessa could protest, before she could explain the mistake, they shoved her, hard. She stumbled out from behind the tapestry, into the full, unforgiving light of the great hall. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. They saw her as her stepsisters intended, a smudge. Her brown wool dress was plain, stained at the hem with mud. A piece of straw was tangled in her simple brown braid. She wore no jewels, no paint, no finery. She looked like what she was, a servant who had wandered into the wrong room. Laughter started to bubble up, cruel and sharp. Her face burned with a shame so profound it stole her breath. She wanted the stone floor to swallow her whole. Her gaze was fixed on the floor, on her own scuffed boots, unable to look at the king. She took a hesitant step, then another, compelled forward by the weight of 1,000 staring eyes. The walk down the long aisle was the most agonizing journey of her life. Each step was an eternity of humiliation. But then something shifted in the air. The laughter died, replaced by a confused, uneasy murmur. From his throne, Thane had not moved, but the boredom had vanished from his face. His head tilted slightly, like a wolf catching a scent on the wind. His golden eyes, which had been so distant, were now fixed on her, and they were no longer pale. They were burning, a deep, molten amber that seemed to glow from within. He smelled it. Beneath the cloying perfumes and the scent of cooked food, a scent reached him that cut through everything else. It was wild and clean. It smelled of winter earth, of crushed pine needles, of loyal beasts and something else, something uniquely, intoxicatingly female. It was the scent of home, a home his wolf had been searching for its entire life. The beast inside him, the one he had leashed and controlled since his first shift, surged against his ribs with a force that almost buckled him. It was a raw, primal recognition, a roar in his soul that screamed one word: mine. Nessa didn't know any of this. All she knew was that the king was looking at her, really looking at her. And in his gaze there was no disgust, no amusement. There was a shocking, terrifying intensity, an utter, focused stillness that made the air crackle. Then, at the long table reserved for the pack elders, a man with hair as white as snow pushed his chair back. His ancient eyes were wide with disbelief and awe. He slowly, reverently, got to his feet. Another elder followed his lead, then another. All down the long table, the oldest and most powerful members of the conclave began to rise. They were not looking at Thane. They were looking at Nessa. They were not seeing a kennel keeper in a stained dress. They were sensing the cataclysmic shift in their alpha. They were feeling the ancient magic of the mate bond, dormant for generations, roaring back to life in the center of the hall. They stood in deference to that power, to the will of the great wolf spirit itself. By the time Nessa reached the foot of the dais, every elder was standing. The great hall was utterly silent, save for the crackling of the torches on the walls. Her stepsisters' faces were frozen in masks of horror and confusion. Nessa finally lifted her eyes to meet the king's. The heat radiating from him was a palpable thing, a wave of warmth that pushed back the chill of the cavernous room. His knuckles were white where he gripped the arms of his throne. The man was gone, and the wolf was looking out through his eyes. He spoke, and his voice was not the measured tone of a ruler. It was a low, guttural sound, a rumble that vibrated through the stone floor and up through the soles of Nessa's boots. It was the sound of possession, of absolute certainty. "You," he said, and that one word sealed her fate. He rose from his throne in a single, fluid motion. He was taller than she had imagined, a mountain of a man who dwarfed everyone around him. He descended the 3 steps of the dais and stopped directly in front of her. He was so close she could feel the heat of his body, smell the scent of pine smoke and cold iron that clung to him. He reached out, and for a terrifying second, she thought he would strike her. Instead, his large, calloused hand came up, and his fingers gently, almost reverently, brushed the piece of straw from her hair. His touch was like lightning on her skin. A jolt of pure energy shot through her, making her gasp. The bond slammed into her, a dizzying wave of heat and longing, and a strange, aching sense of coming home. It was terrifying and overwhelming. Thane's amber eyes never left hers. He saw the fear in them, but beneath it, he saw a quiet strength that no pampered lady in the hall possessed. He saw the soul his own Kripon had been crying out for. He turned his head slightly, his gaze sweeping over the shocked faces of the court, over the ashen faces of Iona and Kate, and over the standing elders. His voice rang out, clear and final, a command that would not be questioned. "The trial is over," he declared. "Guards, escort the Lady Nessa to the Queen's chambers in the East Tower." See that she is given every comfort. No one is to disturb her." He looked back down at Nessa, his expression unreadable, but his eyes blazing with a possessive fire. "She is under my protection now." Two of his personal guard, men built like oaks, moved to her side. They were respectful, but their presence was absolute. This was not a request. Nessa felt a dizzying sense of unreality. The Queen's chambers? The East Tower had been sealed for 50 years, since the death of the last Luna. She was led away, her steps unsteady. She didn't look back at her stepsisters, but she could feel their hatred burning into her back. The great hall erupted into a maelstrom of whispers behind her, but the heavy tread of the guards at her side was the only sound in her world. They led her through corridors of cold stone, up winding staircases she had never been permitted to use, toward a fate she could not begin to comprehend. The East Tower was just as the stories claimed, silent, draped in dust cloths, and frozen in time. But the Queen's chambers were not. A fire had already been lit in the massive stone hearth, chasing away the chill. The air smelled of dried lavender and beeswax. Fresh linens were on the enormous canopied bed, and a simple but warm meal was laid out on a small table. Nessa stood in the center of the room, feeling smaller than ever. This was a cage, however gilded. She had been taken from her hounds, from the only place she had ever felt she belonged, and locked away in a princess's story that felt like a nightmare. She didn't touch the food. She walked to the tall, arched window and looked out. The moon was high and full, silvering the snow-dusted peaks of the mountains that surrounded the fortress. Below, she could just make out the dark shape of the kennels. A lonely howl rose on the wind, and her heart ached with a homesickness so sharp it was a physical pain. It was Fen calling for her. She was still standing there when the heavy oak door opened without a knock. Alpha King Thane filled the doorway, his presence sucking the air from the room. He had shed the heavy fur cloak, and in a simple black tunic and breeches he looked even more formidable, his powerful muscles clearly defined. He closed the door behind him, the sound of the latch clicking into place echoing the sound of a cell door locking. He did not approach her, but remained by the door, his golden eyes tracking her every breath. "You are afraid," he stated. It was not a question. Nessa found her voice, though it was thin and reedy. "I do not understand what is happening." "You do not need to understand it," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You only need to accept it." A spark of defiance kindled in her chest. She had been pushed and pulled and commanded her whole life. She turned from the window to face him fully. "Accept what? Being humiliated in front of the entire court? Being locked in this room? I have done nothing to deserve this." For the first time, a flicker of something other than command crossed his face. It might have been surprise. He took a step into the room. "Humiliated? You were not humiliated. You were revealed." "I was made a fool of by my stepsisters," she shot back, her voice gaining strength. "That was not my name on the scroll. I am a kennel keeper. I have no title, no lineage. I do not belong here." "You belong exactly where you are," he said, his voice dropping, becoming rougher, more guttural. "You belong with me." He took another step and another until he stood only a few feet from her. The heat coming off him was intense. "Do you not feel it?" "I feel confused," she whispered, though it was a lie. She felt it, a strange pull in her center, a warmth that had started the moment he touched her and had been growing ever since, an ache that was both frightening and deeply comforting. "It is the bond," he said, his eyes burning into hers. My wolf knew you the moment you entered the hall. The scent of you, it called to him. You are my mate, Nessa, the one chosen for me by fate. The words hung in the air between them, more shocking than any shout. Mate. It was a word from legends, a sacred and unbreakable connection spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. It was not something that happened to a girl like her. That's impossible, she breathed. Such things are just stories. It is not a story, he growled, a sound of pure frustration. He closed the remaining distance between them, and his hands came up to cup her face. His palms were rough against her skin, but his hold was surprisingly gentle. The contact was electric. The bond flared between them, a tangible current of energy that made her knees weak. His scent filled her senses, pine and iron and the wild, musky scent of the wolf itself. It should have been terrifying, but it wasn't. It felt right. My wolf has been silent since the wars, he murmured, his voice raw with a vulnerability that stunned her. I thought that part of me was dead, but it recognized you. It has not been still since you walked into that hall. It craves you. I crave you. He was the most powerful man in the territories, an alpha king whose will was law, and he was speaking to her with a desperate honesty that shattered her fear and replaced it with a dawning, terrifying compassion. She saw past the hardened warrior, the cold ruler, and saw the profound loneliness in his soul. A loneliness that mirrored her own. He was waiting for her to pull away, to scream, to fight him. He was coiled, ready for rejection, but Nessa did not pull away. She leaned into his touch, just slightly. A small, almost imperceptible movement. But he felt it. His entire body went rigid with shock. A low sound, half growl, half groan, escaped his throat. His grip on her face tightened fractionally. You feel it too, he whispered, his eyes searching hers. I feel something, she admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know what it is. It is everything, he said simply. He released her face and took a step back, putting distance between them again, as if her acceptance was more dangerous than her fear. The effort it cost him was visible in the corded muscles of his neck. You will stay here, in this tower. You will be safe. You will want for nothing. And my hounds? She asked, the question soft but firm. Fen is sick. He needs me. His jaw tightened. The ruler was back. You are not a kennel keeper anymore. You are the future Luna of this pack. I am Nessa, she said, lifting her chin, and I do not abandon those in my care. He stared at her for a long, silent moment. The battle within him was plain on his face. The Alpha King fought with the man, and the man fought with the wolf. Finally, he gave a short, sharp nod. I will have the pup brought to the tower stables. You may see to him there, but you will not go to the main kennels. It is not safe for you. Safe from whom? She asked. A dark look crossed his face. From everyone. You were chosen in a way no one expected. There will be jealousy, challenges, those who see you as a weakness in me. His eyes met hers. They will be mistaken. Would you have trusted him when he promised you safety but locked you in a tower? Tell me in the comments, and if you are not subscribed yet, join this family. The days that followed were a strange dream. Nessa was a prisoner in luxury. Maids brought her gowns of soft wool and velvet, which she left untouched in the wardrobe. They brought her trays of food she barely ate. Her only solace was the small, clean stable attached to the base of the tower, where Fen was recovering under her care. The pup, feeling his alpha's favor by proxy, was thriving. Thane came to her every evening. He never touched her again, but he would stand in her chambers and simply watch her, his golden eyes filled with a fierce, possessive hunger that both thrilled and terrified her. They spoke little. He was not a man of easy words. He would tell her of pack business, of disputes between minor lords, of the reports from the border patrols. He spoke to her as if she were already his counsel, his other half, and she, in turn, would tell him about the hounds, about the shy courage of Fen, the grumpy loyalty of the old alpha male, Boris, the mischievous nature of the new litter. She spoke of them with such simple, unaffected love that he found himself listening for hours, mesmerized. He was discovering the woman his wolf had known instantly. She was compassionate, but not weak. She was quiet, but not timid. She possessed a core of inner strength that had been forged in a life of being overlooked. She had a gentle fortitude that he, a man of brutal force, found himself profoundly drawn to. One evening, he found her not in her chambers, but in the small, dusty library connected to her suite. She was sitting on the floor, a heavy leather-bound book open in her lap. The firelight danced on her face, making her plain features seem soft and beautiful. He stopped in the doorway, just watching her. She was so engrossed, she didn't notice him. He saw the title on the book's spine, The Elder Lines and Their Gifts. It was an ancient text, detailing the dormant magics that ran in the blood of the oldest families. "What have you found?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. She started, looking up at him with wide eyes. I was just curious. The elders, the way they stood for me. I wanted to understand why." He walked into the room and sat in the heavy chair opposite the hearth, a gesture that was almost casual, almost comfortable. "They did not stand for you, Nessa. They stood for the bond. It is a power they have not felt in their lifetimes. A true mating, not a political alliance. It strengthens the pack. It strengthens the Alpha King." She looked down at the book. "This speaks of gifts, of Lunai who could soothe the rage of a berserker wolf, who could sense poison, who could heal with a touch." She traced the faded script with her finger. "My mother was a healer, not with magic, with herbs and knowledge. But people said she had a calm hand. Animals and children were always at ease with her." Thane watched her, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. Her scent, her compassion, the way animals trusted her implicitly. It was not just her personality, it was in her blood. A dormant power, an echo of an ancient line awakened by the mate bond. "Your bloodline may be more significant than you know," he said carefully. Before she could reply, the heavy door to the chambers was thrown open. A guard stood there, his face pale. Behind him stood Lord Valerius, Nessa's stepfather, and flanking him were Iona and Kate, their faces pinched with malice. "Alpha King," Valerius said, bowing stiffly, though his eyes were hard. "I must protest this situation. You have sequestered my ward without a formal betrothal, without consulting me. It is a slight against my house." Thane rose slowly to his feet. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 20 degrees. The wolf was at the surface, a low growl rumbling in his chest that was felt more than heard. "Your ward," he said, the words laced with cold fury. "You speak of her now as if she is a treasure you have been deprived of. My sources tell me she was treated as less than a servant in your home." Iona stepped forward. her voice dripping with false concern. "My king, we are only worried for you. This girl, she is not what she seems. She is a cunning, manipulative creature who has somehow bewitched you. She is no true mate. She is an empty vessel. There is no power in her." "Her name is Nessa," Thane snarled, taking a protective step that placed him partially in front of her. "And you will address her with respect." "Respect?" Kate laughed, a shrill, ugly sound. "For a stable girl who smells of dog? You dishonor yourself, and you weaken the pack by choosing this nothing." The insult was not just to Nessa. It was a direct challenge to his authority, to his choice, to the bond itself. It was treason, spoken aloud in his own tower. Thane's control snapped. His form seemed to blur, to swell, the air around him shimmering with raw power. His eyes bled from gold to burning amber, the pupils elongating. The wolf was coming through, but before he could unleash the violence that was coiling in his muscles, Nessa moved. She stepped out from behind him, her small hand resting on his forearm. "Thane," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "Don't." His skin was scorching hot beneath her touch, his muscles hard as stone. The primal rage radiating from him was a terrifying force, but she felt no fear. She felt the bond, a conduit between them. She pushed a sense of calm through it, a feeling of cool water on a raging fire. "I am here. I am safe. Do not let them make you a monster." He flinched as if she had struck him, the amber in his eyes receding slightly. He looked down at her, his breathing harsh, his chest heaving. He was still furious, but her touch, her silent plea, had reached him. It had pulled him back from the brink. She turned her gaze to her stepfamily. The fear she had lived with her entire life was gone, burned away by the fire of the bond and the fierce protectiveness of the man beside her. She saw them now for what they were, small, petty, and cruel. "You say I am nothing," she said, her voice steady. "You say I have no power. But I see the truth. You are not worried for our king. You are terrified that the girl you tried to humiliate is now beyond your reach. You are terrified that someone you deemed worthless has been seen as worthy by the one man whose opinion matters." She took a step toward them, and it was Lord Valerius who took an involuntary step back. "My power is not in a title or in a bloodline you can read in a book. My power is in the loyalty of the beasts you scorn, and in the heart of the alpha you sought to manipulate. You have no standing here." She looked past them, to the pale-faced guard in the doorway. "Please escort them out. They are not welcome in my home." The authority in her voice was absolute. It was the voice of a Luna. The guard, hearing the command, did not look to his alpha for confirmation. He bowed his head to Nessa. "Yes, my lady." As they were led away, sputtering with indignation, Thane turned to Nessa. He stared at her, his expression one of profound awe. He reached out and cupped her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. "A Luna's first command," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. "You have a strength they will never understand. You calmed the storm in me, Nessa. No one has ever been able to do that." In the quiet of the library, with the firelight warming their faces, she finally understood. She was not a prisoner. She was being protected. She was not being hidden away. She was being given the space to become who she was always meant to be. She lifted her hand and placed it over his on her cheek. "I am not afraid anymore," she whispered. He closed his eyes, a shudder running through his powerful frame. "Good," he breathed, "because I need you beside me." The incident with her stepfamily was only the beginning. Lord Valerius, deeply shamed, began to conspire. Whispers started in the court, fueled by his bitterness. They said Thane was weakened by his infatuation with a commoner. They said the bond was a lie, a delusion brought on by the pressures of his rule. A rival lord, a man named Pierce, whose own daughter had been a front-runner in the Luna trial, began to listen to these whispers. Thane was forced to call a formal council of the clan lords. It was a test of his power and of Nessa's place. She was expected to sit silently behind a screen, as was the custom for women not yet formally claimed. But when Thane entered the council hall, Nessa was walking beside him. She wore a simple gown of deep forest green, her hair in a single braid down her back. She wore no jewels, but she wore a quiet dignity that silenced the murmurs that started when she appeared. She took her seat in a chair placed directly beside his, a position of honor which no one had occupied in his lifetime. Lord Pierce rose to speak. "Alpha King," he began, his voice slick with false deference. "We have all seen your favor toward this young woman. But the strength of the pack requires a strategic alliance, a mate from a powerful house, not a foundling from the kennels. We question the validity of this supposed bond." "You question my word?" Thane's voice was deadly calm. "I question what is best for us all," Pierce countered. "A bond should be proven. The old tales speak of a Luna's gifts. If she is who you say she is, let her prove it. Let her show us a sign of her power." It was a trap. They expected her to fail, to be exposed as ordinary, thereby undermining Thane's judgment and forcing him into an alliance with a house like Pierce's. Thane was about to refuse, to end the council with a show of force. But Nessa placed a calming hand on his arm again. She stood, her heart pounding, but her voice even. "You wish for a sign, Lord Pierce?" she asked, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the assembled lords. "Power is not always a thunderclap. Sometimes it is a whisper. Sometimes it is found in what is seen and what is unseen." She walked slowly toward the center of the room. "I do not have the gift of fire or of prophecy, but I have the gift my mother gave me, the gift of observation, the gift of seeing what is true." She turned her clear, honest gaze back to Pierce. "For weeks, your men have been trading supplies with the Broken Fang marauders across the southern border. You have been selling them grain and steel from our own stores, weakening our defenses, in exchange for their promise to support your claim should our Alpha King fall." A shocked silence descended on the hall. Pierce went white, then purple with rage. "Lies! The ravings of a mad girl! You have no proof." "Don't I?" Nessa's voice was soft. "Your stable master has a new horse, a breed only found in the southern wastes. Your guards carry whetstones of a reddish rock not found in our mountains. And you, my lord," she said, her eyes narrowing, "you smell of it. The faint, sour scent of the river reeds that grow only on their side of the border. You met with them yourself, less than 2 nights ago. It was her gift. Not magic, but a deep, intuitive connection to the natural world, honed by years of tending to animals. An almost supernatural sense of smell and observation, awakened and amplified by the bond. She could smell the lie on him, the scent of a foreign territory. Thane's eyes widened in understanding. He had been so focused on the political maneuvering, he had missed the subtle signs. But his wolf and his mate had not. He rose to his full height, his face a mask of cold judgment. "Guards," he commanded, "seize Lord Pierce, search his quarters and question his men, separately." The conspiracy unraveled within the hour. The proof was undeniable. Pierce and his allies, including Lord Valerius, were exposed as traitors. Justice was swift and absolute. Her stepfamily was stripped of their lands and titles, exiled to the frozen wastes of the far north, a fate worse than death. That evening, in the great hall, before the entire court and the humbled clan lords, Thane stood with Nessa before the ancient hearthstone. The elders stood in a silent, approving circle around them. "Tonight," Thane's voice boomed, filled with pride and a deep, resonant love, "there will be no more questions, no more whispers." He turned to Nessa. His eyes, once so cold, were filled with a warmth that was for her alone. "You are the heart of this pack. You are the heart of me. You saw the truth when I was blinded by politics. You showed them that true power is not a sword, but a steady soul." He took her hand. "I, Thane, Alpha of the Blackwood Pack, claim you, Nessa, as my mate, my Luna, my queen. Before the eyes of the old gods and the new." He leaned down and for the first time, he kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion, but of deep, reverent promise. It was the sealing of the bond, a public declaration. As their lips met, a faint golden light shimmered in the air around them, a visible manifestation of the magic that had bound their souls together. The court knelt as one. They were not just kneeling to their Alpha King, they were kneeling to their Luna. Months later, the first snows of winter were blanketing the mountains. The fortress of Stonefall was warm and secure. Nessa, now Luna of the pack, had brought a peace and stability to the hold that no one had thought possible. Her quiet compassion had soothed old rivalries, and her keen observations had rooted out corruption Thane had never seen. The people loved her. The hounds were still her dearest companions, and she often walked among them, Fen now a strapping young adult who never left her side. Her dormant bloodline gift had blossomed. It was a form of empathy, a deep connection to the living things around her. She could calm a nervous horse with a touch, sense sickness in the pack before it manifested, and feel the truth or falsehood in a person's heart. She was the perfect balance to Thane's iron rule. One night, she found him standing on the high battlements, looking out at the moonlit expanse of his territory. A heavy burden still sat on his shoulders, the constant weight of leadership. She came to stand beside him, pulling her fur-lined cloak tighter against the cold. She didn't speak, just slipped her hand into his. His large, calloused hand enveloped hers, his thumb stroking the back of her wrist. They stood in comfortable silence for a long time, watching the snow fall. "I never knew," he said finally, his voice a low rumble in the quiet night. "I never knew what it was I was fighting for. I thought it was land, power, security." He turned to look at her, the moonlight catching the silver in his dark hair. "I was wrong. All this time I was fighting my way to you." Nessa leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart full. The overlooked kennel keeper, the girl in the stained dress, was gone. In her place was a queen, not because of a crown or a title, but because she had been seen, truly and completely, by the one person whose soul recognized her own. "I am home, Thane," she whispered into the cold night air. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her tight against his side. "I know," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer hid from her. "So am I." and for the first time, the great Alpha King felt completely at peace, his wolf and his soul finally at rest. For more stories where quiet compassion conquers the burdens of command, and where being overlooked becomes the source of a woman's greatest strength, subscribe to His Wolf Knew First. So tell me, would you have stayed? Comment where you are listening from tonight. I stay up until my eyes burn to bring you these stories. If this one touched you, do not break my heart. Subscribe and I will see you in the next one.